Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So it's a pleasure, of course, to speak with you. And we had a very nice debate in our small group, inspired by your speech. And we pretty much agree on your vision about the decline of European Union, the decline of the empire of United States. And we see that a change is needed. And we were wondering if maybe, as you were saying, to invest in human resources, if maybe education can be the answer to make this investment in human resources. But we also know that education is not neutral. It's something that is related with the culture, with the ideology, with the economic system. So which kind of change our education system needs to make then the big change in the world? So which is your vision upon the future of the education? That was like the question that we choose for you.
Okay, and I'm supposed to answer this question now.
I don't know. If you like.
Okay, good. Well, I'm no expert on education as such, but I have been an educator for many years, and I am concerned about a couple of things in the present educational system. People read too little. There's too little book knowledge. There is too little interest in the long argument, and too much interest in 2 A4 pages, secondary literature, and images and videos. I mean, I'm not against it, but if you want to understand a complex world, you have to read and study a complex analysis of it. There's too much simplification going on in a lot of educational systems, including at the university level, where I've been teaching for many years in different countries. And I would say, over the last 30 years, even more, 40 years where I've been teaching, there's less and less reading. And I recommend books as a way to know the world. The problem I see not in your question, but in the question about education is, well, we don't have the time to educate a new generation. We have to do with what we have. And I would say lifelong education, education online. I would say cross-cultural education is some of the most important thing we need to do. We cannot go on going to schools in Denmark or Sweden and learn basically, Swedish or Danish history or some kings or queens and things like that, or just learn about Christianity. We will simply have as our duty to learn most about those who are different from us. And that's not taught in very many places. If you look at, I'm not sure how they compare, but if you look at comparative studies of educational systems, as far as I've understood, as I said, I'm no expert on it, there are 3 countries which are doing particularly well. One is Finland, the other one is Vietnam, and the third one is China. Allegedly, if you're a socially disadvantaged boy or girl in Vietnam or China, you will get out of the educational system with the same results or better results than a middle-class boy in Europe, or boy or girl in Europe will. And that means there has to be an emphasis on getting as many as possible into various types of educational systems. I don't believe, and that's the last thing I'm going to say, not to spend all the time on this, I don't think that the main education in the future will be that children go to schools, to physical buildings and listen to more or less boring teachers. We will have online, we will have complete, also after the COVID, where people have found out that it's possible to teach pupils, children, etc., on their computers and telephones. We will have a complete change in what it means to be taught something, or from the other side, learn something. We will come to learn lifelong in the future, and from many sources and from many cultures, which is a great privilege that we should use, which, for instance, when I was a child, there was only one school to go to. I mean, there was no choice, and there was no idea about being taught by or learn something about, the other side of the globe. So we're very privileged, but it means hard work. And I'm back to the question, a complex world needs complex arguments and complex analyses, and some of them cannot be understood in less than 200 or 300 pages.
Thank you. Yes,
I always tell my students, read, read, read.
that's a good advice. Yes. Now we have Katrin Bromund. Maybe you can unmute yourself and make the question.
Not how. I couldn't hear what you said, actually. We have what?
Yeah, there is a person in the chat, Katrin. She's asking the question, and then we're just trying to find her, that she would raise the, she would unmute herself and ask this question. She cannot unmute.
She says she cannot unmute herself, so.
Yeah, okay. But the question is written, so I can read it. What is your opinion about the Waldorf education?
Of the what?
About the Waldorf education. Waldorf school.
That I can't give you because, you know, there are a few things in the world I don't know anything about.
That's cool. Also not so much related. We have a question from the group number 3, which is Dali, Ruslan, and Agne. If you can unmute yourselves and make the question.
Oh. Are we unmuted? Can you hear us?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Hi. We were just wondering that we had a talk about COVID-19, we had a talk about capitalism, and I mean, capitalism in a way can take advantage of anything. And for example, speaking about COVID-19, do you maybe know, will capitalism use the COVID-19 for its own benefit, or maybe how it's using it at this specific moment of time? Thank you.
Well, if you're asking me, I don't think it will last the way we know it. We may call it capitalism, but it's an outdated system. If you can find a capitalism that does not build on constant material growth, I don't care what we call it. If you look at the Chinese, they have used capitalism extensively, but they have mixed it with all kinds of state ownership, state enterprises, long-range planning, and limited sectors, so that you have, and you had that in the old Yugoslavia. I'm not going to compare the two countries directly, but the idea is many different economic systems should and can coexist. Some countries may need one type of more or less socialist or mixed economy or green economy or whatever. Whether we call it capitalism or something else is not very important. The whole thing is that we need to find out what suits each country best and what suits the whole globe best. And we know that the kind of capitalism we've had so far is not sustainable. You know, if capitalism and capitalists can reinvent themselves, I'm not against it. It gives wonderful products too, and not only problems. You know, it's thanks to capitalism we're sitting and talking with each other this way and across the globe. But it is not something, certain dimensions of it will not be possible to uphold in the future. And I'm for mixtures. I don't understand. I'm against any system, even if it was Gandhian economy or something. I would be against any system that should cover the whole globe and where everybody should be part of it and where it's universal. No matter what, the Chinese, the Western, any system, and that also goes for culture and religion. I'm for diversity for the simple reason that if everybody has the same system, and there is only one system, we will all go down if that system breaks down. We have to have, you know, walk on more legs and have some kind of reduction of vulnerability. And that means while some economies may go down, they should not drag the rest of the world down with them. And that's where I think we have to have a multi-economy, or whatever you'd call it. I'm just, you know, responding spontaneously to your question. I don't think that capitalism can take advantage of its own disastrous elements, but there are other parts which can. If I may give you an idea, the Quakers are running companies according to capitalist principles, but completely differently from other capitalist ways of thinking, such as consensus decision-making, no violence, being very careful with extraction, with production and consumption. You know, a caring capitalism might be possible, But what I see in China and elsewhere, where things have worked well, at least for a period, it was always mixed economies in the sense, not only there was a mixed economy like the Swedish, you know, half state, half private, but it was mixed also in the sense that there were different types of economies: cooperative economy, green economy, state enterprises, and capitalism, local capitalism, market. We call it a market system. Market is where you go and buy vegetables. You know, that's also a market. If you have different economic systems together, you have greater security, in my view. The only glue that should be is that they should be able to cooperate. If somebody wants to dominate and say our economic system should dominate the rest of the world, I think it's a stupid idea, as you know from my lecture, but I also think it's a vulnerable system. And what I'm fearful of is that because of the still great importance of the US economy, Western Europe, and those who are too closely allied with or dependent upon the United States economy or the European economy will go down the drain, because that is going down. So walk on 2 or 4 legs, that's better than being totally dependent. The same goes with, you know, security politics. If you're only having a NATO-oriented policies, you're going to fail in the future, in my view. I'm sure the whole economic science needs to be reformed. What we call science of economy is an absolutely you know, more or less fake or omitted science, in the sense that, you know, we still have at our universities, as last I'm going to say, we still have in our universities something called national economy. I mean, these guys are sitting studying something that doesn't exist anymore. We don't have it. Well, there's not even North Korea. There's no national economy anymore in the world. But the universities are full of departments or Institute of National Economy. It's ridiculous. Mm. But you have to be an economist to sit there.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
So we have another question from Tuuliki.
Yeah. Hi, I hope you can hear me. I want
Hello.
I guess from all of us, thank you so much for your contribution. And yeah, we had.
Thanks for being there.
We had 5 different questions, which I will try to put into one right now.
You'll be killed later on by the rest.
Maybe. Yes. So I will start with the, first of all, that which is kind of maybe some sort of a conclusion of our discussion, that for example, when you take European Union as an example, then it's based on, for example, countries that have similar values, like for example, democracy. And at the same time, how the European Union functions is that it provides equal opportunities and also equal requirements for each member state, basically. And then our question is that now that the European Union is a bit more fragmented and we are moving towards different kind of new alliances, like for example, the BRI, then what do you think is the realistic transition that we will undergo, taking into account, for example, the different political ideologies that we have? Hypothetically speaking, if the US empire will fall, is there a possibility for a new one to rise? Because this is the tendency that we have. And who would it be, this political power? And yeah, how to actually, in this transition, again, using the example of BRI, for example, to make sure that there is a proper dialogue between all the countries who are involved, or it doesn't have to be BRI, but something else, so that every country's needs would be met, not through equality, but more through equity.
Well, you're obviously aware that this is a huge question that I cannot answer.
I really tried.
And you didn't manage to put it into one question. You'll probably survive later today by your friends. Jokes aside, I think that you said, what is the most realistic way? I really must say I don't know, because I don't know how long time the West will be wasting in trying to demonize and be confrontational with the change outside the Western culture or hemisphere. And that for every day that passes, it'll be more difficult to build something together. the way the Chinese do it is not by building alliances, it's by opening up for a kind of, as the Belt and Road Initiative is, an open framework where basically everybody can buy into. I mean, the BRI is a thing that nobody has a total view of because it is so many faceted that there's no way you can say, oh, but that's what it is. I mean, NATO, yeah, we know it's a military alliance consisting of 29 countries or whatever. And it does this and that, and then it has a declaration of what it should, and it's an alliance, and there's some obligations and all that. The Belt and Road Initiative is completely much more blurred, much more diverse, much more, you can say it's this, but it's also that, when it's also that. And so the Chinese are thinking in completely different ways, not in a linear way of thinking. They are thinking much more in circles and networks and that type of stuff, as you can see. From how it's breeding. The only country in the Western world that is part of the Belt and Road Initiative formally through written agreement is Italy. And then there's a huge investment now by China in Serbia and to a certain extent in Greece. And all these countries are told not to do it. If you go with the Chinese, you'll not be part of the European Union in the future, etc. You know, I would like this to be an orderly transition, of course, but I don't have that strategy in my mind. I can't see it happen. I see a period now in the next 5 or 10 years, whatever, as fragmenting, as nasty surprises, as confrontation, as this and that from the West against the East, not the other way. And then I see some kind of, you know, moderation to the fact of the world. I mean, there's at some point, you know, when Titanic go down, you find out that you have wet feet. You see what I mean? As long as you're sitting at the dinner table and the music is playing, you can deny it. But at some point, you know, the water comes in. So what you said was something very important, namely, how will all countries buy into this? And you may remember I'm saying in my lecture that I think we should think regionally. We should have regional United Nations or other type of corporations. We should have consultative meetings. We should have not a General Assembly of the United Nations that consists only of government representatives that none of us have ever elected. I mean, you said the EU is built on democracy. I doubt that, because all those who represent, let's say, the ambassadors of Denmark, or the representatives of the European Union vis-a-vis other organizations, the Commission, etc. None of these people are elected. I don't know even their names. I have no idea. What we can vote for is our parliaments, in which parties have decided which candidates we can vote on. So what you can do is you can go and vote, but you cannot choose. You see what I mean? That's a fundamental change here. You get a list when you go and put your cross in a democratic election on a parliament or local municipality person. Those have already been selected inside parties. That's not democracy in my view. Mind you, by the way, there's no political parties in Iran. Anybody can become a candidate. That's kind of more interesting in a way. I'm not saying it's a democracy, but I'm saying it's an interesting way not to have political parties. I think political parties are going to die out. I mean, who's interested in it? There are fewer members of parties and political parties in Denmark than there are bird watchers organization members. So, I mean, this is dying out. We have to make decisions in a new way in the new world. And if you can decide which song is the best in the European Song Contest or whatever it's called, Eurovision Song Contest, 300 million looking and voting for the best song, maybe that's the kind of model for how we will vote for our leaders in the future. I don't know, but you know, everything we take for granted today will have to change because it doesn't work. I stood, let me finalize this I stood in Venice quite a lot last year because I have an installation about the Silk Roads because I'm also doing photography and stuff like that. So I was standing for a very long time, several weeks in Venice at the Venice Biennale. And I talked with people from all over the world. There's one I talked with about 1,500 people. You know, it's not scientific, but there's one consistent theme that goes through no matter where people come from. They don't believe that they can influence things through parliamentary democracy. And particularly the Americans, of course, who came and said, we're desperate. What shall we do? There's only this Mr. Trump, you know, we don't want him and we can't get rid of him. You know, that was what many of these, of course, more intellectual Americans said. So my point is simply, even decision-making at the local level, the national level, as long as we have nation states, the regional level and the global level have to be something we think of in new ways. And modern technology will definitely play a role there. I would like people's assemblies, NGO assemblies, schools assemblies. I don't see the governments as the only legitimate representatives anymore of us, the people. And if you go to the preamble of the United Nations Charter, it says we the peoples. It doesn't say we the governments. So reduce governments and increase the importance of people.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. So now there is Henrik, if I'm right pronouncing the name.
Yeah, hi, Enrique from Lindersborg, Denmark. And my question is, nowadays we're living the end of United States imperialism. So the history show us that in the past were different kind of imperiums, Roman Imperium, Spanish Imperium, British, Ottoman. Now we are living the United States imperialism. My question is, it is possible a world without any kind of imperialism?
Yes, you can think of such a world. That's definitely possible. What you probably want to know is whether it's likely to happen. And in the lecture, I'm trying to say that we have had many empires, and you have already mentioned some of them, and they've all gone down. You know, there's one thing that you can be sure of about empires. They go up, they mature, they are on the peak point, they dominate everything, and sooner or later they begin to decline and fall and disappear. I mean, this is history. You can read Toynbee, you can read Ibn Khaldun, you can read Chinese philosophers. It's in different patterns, you know, things go up and things go down again. Empires definitely, and that was what happened the end of the 80s, they go down. And where people thought, you know, generally speaking, that the Soviet Union was, you know, strong, concrete, you know, thing that would never disappear, socialism and all that. It took a few years and the whole thing had broken apart and the Warsaw Pact disappeared. There were probably maximum 5 intellectuals in anywhere in the world who predicted that the Soviet Union would go down. And I belong to those who have for quite a few years said that the United States is going to go down. You know, it's like saying all the day around, it's 12 o'clock, you know, 2 times every 24 hours. You're right. It's going to happen. Now, the next question is, will there be a new one? If there would be a new one at this moment, it would be China trying to dominate the whole world. They will be influential. They will be the most powerful. They will probably be the most dynamic in terms of economy and technological intervention, innovations, but it's not in my crystal ball that they will try to make us all speak Chinese, to think in Chinese ways. I don't think they will build 600 military bases around the world. They're too smart for that, and they know it would be a horrible burden, and they learn from other people's mistake. And culturally speaking, and I've been living I've been 2 times to China and travel around, but I've been living quite a lot in Japan. And I know there are huge differences between the 2 countries, don't get me wrong, but there's one thing the people over there are not bent on, and that's Christian mission activity. This idea that the rest of the world must become like us belongs much more to the West than to the East. I mean, it's not in the cards of the Buddhists to do that. It was never in the cards of Gandhi to do that. And if you get too close to them, and I've seen that with my students in Japanese universities, Western students who learned perfectly well to speak Japanese, maybe with a little, you know, different accent or something like that. Then they are criticized by the Japanese they meet in the shops and schools and elsewhere. Oh, you did a wrong thing there. You shouldn't say it that way. You know, they don't want everybody to be like them. They want to be special and unique in themselves. So interest and openness, yes, but the idea that we want to impose ourselves on them, we want everybody else to be like us, that is not in the cultural code or the cosmology of these countries, in my view. I'm talking in very gross terms here, and it's partly what I've seen myself and experienced. So I do not think anybody would be also as stupid to try to believe that with approaching 8 billion people, 10 billion people, 12 billion people, huge, complex developments, that we would have some one country or one government or one leader saying everybody should follow our idea. This idea, no matter what the principles are, is as bizarre as if somebody came to Denmark and say, you should have Sharia law. You know, it doesn't work that somebody comes from the outside and imposes his or her system, thinking, religion, values on somebody else. Whereas what will work is cooperation in diversity. It's fun to meet people who are different. It's not fun to meet the same type of people as you are yourself. This uniformity is a dangerous thing. And it's also a stupid thing. It creates resistance, because we ourselves in the West would not like to just buy somebody else's system if somebody came, with a Bible and a sword and say, now Denmark has to do what we say and become one of us and be exploited by us and all that. But of course, there is power here. I'm not denying. The Chinese are also trying to get power. But they are basically doing it in order to have their own economy going. They need a world market, and they need resources from around the world to keep their own 1.4 billion people continuing towards a welfare state. And so I think China basically is defensive. You know, the Chinese thinking is you have four corners of the world, but in the middle you have the fifth thing, which we in the West do not talk about, and that's the center. There are more dimensions to all these things, and therefore I always say to my students, travel, 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 go there and see for yourself and speak with these people, and then you can judge for yourself whether you think they'll become imperialists in the future.
Thank you very much, Jan, for your answer. And we would like also to mention that we would like to stick to one question per group or per person, because we can see that there is a lot of traffic of questions, and they would like to stick just for once in order for others also to have the opportunity to ask some questions.
Very good.
And
I will answer in 2 words.
Yeah. And as well, if you have comments back when you receive the answer, I think it's also fair enough to just like give a comment, because we are trying to actually have a discussion or a dialogue. It's that's the main idea. It's just like very difficult to do when we're 100 online, but don't hesitate. If you have a comment to your own, like to the answer you got, just like continue, raise the hand or give us a sign, and we will make possibility to speak.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the next question comes from Mustafa.
Hi. My question is this. You talked a lot about peace, and you talked a lot about weapons and weapon manufacturing. And I want to ask you a question about the Middle East, actually, which is, and when I say the Middle East, I'm also including countries such as Afghanistan, who's also suffering a lot because of the war. So now we're talking Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Palestine, Libya, for example. Now, in my opinion, the Middle East never had a chance to grow ever since the Ottoman Empire, because the downfall of the Ottoman Empire was by the invasion of France and England to the Middle East. And after that, it was and before that, it was World War II. And after that, after those invasions, the Middle East started to suffer because of tyrannies. And now we know that the Arabian Spring started about 10 years ago. My question is, how do you see the future for the Middle East?
That's a nice little piece of cake, sir.
Thank you.
I think you will see the United States and Western powers be forced to withdraw from it. Sooner or later, we will find out that, you know, we're going for other types of energy, but oil and oil-based economy is not important in the future. So that's one reason it will happen like that. Second reason is, and you will see this in Syria in particular, and in Iran, you will see Russia and China getting in and playing an important role. Some will be critical of that role, but when it comes to the rebuilding of the utterly destroyed Syria, where I have been and seen it for myself, it's one of the most shocking things I've seen in my life, and I've seen a few things. The Chinese will come in, and the Iranians, to the extent they have the economy, and the Russians will come in. The Syrian people and leadership there, sometimes called, you know, the regime, which is a propaganda term, will not see money coming in, and they will probably not even wish to have money coming in for rebuilding Syria. What worries me terribly much at these very days is that if I'm correctly informed, on the 1st of July, Israel is going to annex the West Bank. And so if I think of probably the two most unfortunate peoples on earth, it's the Kurds and the Palestinians. And there's no international law anymore operating. They're not even trying to say that this is part of the international law. And the US has said we're not going to have any public opinion about you annexing the Golan Heights and the West Bank, meaning Israel will have to defend itself while it does so, and it will say security, and it will not give a damn about international law, human rights, or anything like that. Now, where that, you know, powder keg will lead us, I don't know. I don't think you will see peace in the Middle East that fast. Now, if I may present a little vision I have, I would see Iran as the Switzerland of the Middle East in the future, as a possibility. Iran is different from all the others because they are not Arabs. Iran has not invaded any other country in the last 250 plus years. Iran is tremendously resourceful and a high educational level. It's just the leadership that needs to be changed, and the West that needs to stop harassing it, which is it's done systematically since the CIA British coup d'etat in 1953 against Dr. Mossadegh, the first democratically elected leader of Iran. So if that could go in the different direction, and we can always hope for the best also in the United States, to stop harassing Iran and threatening it and avoid a war against it, then you might see an Iran that could go through reforms and then be a country where a lot of other countries and peoples would come and do what the Swiss do. They are meeting places for other people to sit and negotiate about their problems. I work a little bit in Iran, and I'm proud to say that Iran has now opened the second of any Muslim country in the world, the second master's degree in peace, academic peace studies, not without my help. And that is a great thing if we could also have a new generation of people taught in nonviolence, conflict resolution, etc., instead of, you know, warfare and the Revolutionary Guard, corruption, and all these kinds of things. So potentially, I think the Middle East could develop into something very positive, but I can't tell you how bad it will go before the Americans and the French and the other colonial countries historically vis-a-vis the Middle East will continue to try to dominate that area. But I think there will not be money to do so also. You know, warfare costs a lot of money, and another war, let's say if the United States starts a war in Iran tomorrow, which we cannot exclude, wars sometimes happen even if nobody intends it, but you know, there's a dynamic which might lead to anyhow a war that nobody really wants but just talked about. If that happened, that would be the end of the US empire. They cannot last one more huge war. And this will be a very serious thing because the Hormuz Strait could be closed, and because Iran's military is not giving up, you know, the first 3 hours as the Iraqi army did. So, I just hope that will never happen. But I am deeply concerned about Western policies against Iran. Iran's people do not deserve this. Sanctions is a cruelty, and it's definitely the whole policy of the West is just making the reforms of Iran much more difficult. So you can keep on like this. Everything we do in the Western world about Iran is short-sighted stupidity. We've learned nothing from the failure of sanctions before, and we've learned nothing from the former wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya and Syria. I mean, Syria was a regime change war. It did not start in April 2011. It started in 2005 or 6. When the American chargé d'affaires in Damascus wrote his cable, you can read it at WikiLeaks, that from now on the US policy should be to destabilize the regime of Bashar al-Assad. And that's what broke out, a confluence of more different, very different streams and elements and events in 11. But few countries have suffered as much as they have. And also the Syrian people do not deserve what they have been part of. We have a huge apology to make and withdraw and let people go their own ways. That's not a very intelligent answer to your question, but I think it's probably the most problematic region in the world for the forthcoming decades too. And not the least because Israel has nuclear weapons and nobody else has. And nobody should have it. According to the United Nations General Assembly resolutions, etc., Israel is a great criminal in the sense that nobody should have weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. And we're focusing all the discussion on Iran, which doesn't have it, in my view, doesn't want to have it. And the whole thing is basically a construction. It's a pretext for warfare. And it's very, very sad.
I actually have a quick follow-up question. When you spoke about Syria, you said Iran, China, and Russia will eventually come in. You also said you have been in Syria. I suppose you already know that Iran and Russia are already in Syria.
Of course.
Could you please?
No, I meant coming in as those who rebuilt the country and helped with the money and getting the country rebuilt. I've been to Aleppo and seen the destruction. There's quite a few things to be done now.
Very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, that was one of the tough questions, tough cookies.
If I may add one little thing, which historically is interesting. The first Silk Roads, those which are now being repeated, the very first Silk Roads ended in Aleppo and Damascus. That was as far as that transport way from China over to Europe went. And there's something very symbolically well, Damascus has not been destroyed, but Aleppo has been destroyed as one of the UNESCO cultural heritage places. And it will predominantly probably be China that comes in and rebuilds it. And I would predict, as Iraq has already become a member of the Belt and Road Initiative, I think that Syria will become the next one in that part of the world.
Okay.
History is interesting.
Definitely. Yes. So we have one more question from Alexander.
Yes. I would like to ask, because in your lecture, of course, you talked a lot about China, but we noticed in our group that there was very little mention about Russia. So we would like to know, how do you see actually Russia's role in the future? And also in the same context, what about the emerging economies in Africa and Latin America?
You see, in a lecture like that, there are limits to what you can manage to mention, and there's 193 members of the United Nations, and I probably mentioned 5 or 7 of them. It was a lousy lecture from that point of view. And also, to tell you the truth, I don't speak about things I don't know anything about. Like a doctor should never talk about a patient he's never seen. And I have no personal experience apart from tourism in South America, so I can read books. You can read Peter Frankopan's book about how the Belt and Road Initiative is operating in Latin America, or South America, as I would prefer to call it, or Central America. And my only experience personally from Africa is way back in my young days, I worked in Somalia for 4 years. And then I worked on and off for 10, 11 years in Burundi. Somalia at the time, when that was the poorest country on earth, and Burundi from 1999 to 2011. And that was at the time when that was and still is the world's poorest country. And, you know, it'll take quite some time before these countries are coming up to anything welfare state-like or something like that. But they are moving in the well, Burundi is not moving in the right direction, but that's a long story. So I'm not sure that I should try to give you guys an impression that I can speak about all kinds of regions and things like that, because I can't. Russia, I'm no expert on Russia, except where Russia fits into the conflict formation of NATO. You know, Russia is one country. It doesn't have a military alliance, and it is up against, if you will, NATO, which is 29 countries, and whose military expenditures is about 12 times bigger than Russia. Now, if you go back to the old Cold War days from the 50s up till let's say 1990, the Warsaw Pact's military expenditures were somewhere between 65–75% of NATO. So there was much more balance in the old days. Whereas now it's, you know, Russia is a relatively weak power compared with NATO. And so what I've been very dismayed to see is that in 1990, the Western world chose to give Gorbachev some very serious oral promises that it would not take advantage of the fact that the Soviet Union was falling apart, or had fallen apart. It would not expand NATO, and it would not have a unified Germany in NATO. These things were not written down, but they are in the archives of the United States, personal notes that were taken when Western leaders queued up to meet Gorbachev in his dacha outside Moscow, and they talked about these things. So it's not something I've invented. Now, the person who scrapped all this and said, I don't give a fuck about promises the Western leaders have given, was Mr. Clinton, whom in 1994 decided to try to make Georgia a NATO member, and then the Baltic states. And then, you know, splitting up Yugoslavia. I consider Bill Clinton one of the worst presidents, foreign policy-wise, but he was such a charming man in most people's views. And the same goes for his foreign minister, Madeleine Albright, who, like himself, is definitely a non-convicted war criminal. So I think we have something to repair with Russia, no matter whether we like the system or whether people like Putin or not, or whatever, all these kinds of, you know, relatively primitive sentiments about whether we like this and that. It's a huge cultural formation with, you know, everything from ballet to literature to philosophy to future thinking. And again, we would win so much more in the Western world if we worked with the Russians. We don't have to love anybody, but we could work with them. And I'm afraid that we're going to see a kind of Cold War developing with Russia. Well, we already have it since, you know, the coup d'etat in Kiev, and what happened after that was, of course, the annexation of Crimea. And, you know, the story, the first thing of that, what I said, the coup d'etat in Kiev is never mentioned in the Western press, but that's what started it all. It was not Putin who out of the blue annexed Crimea. But that is used as a pretext for, you know, huge military exercises, for pushing for new deployments of soldiers up under the skirts of Russia, motherland Russia, if you will. So long story short, I think Russia will successively turn its back to Europe and certainly the United States, and find out that Russia, India, and China have more together in the future to work with, more beneficial. And mind you, also Russia is a part of the Belt and Road Initiative. So I think that's what you're going to see. You're not going to see a kind of aggressive, expansive, war-fighting Russia. They can't afford that either. But you will see Russia sitting and keep sitting in Syria because they have always been in Syria and they're not going to give up. And they're diplomatically and security-wise, they've played a positive role in my view, compared to the Western-supported terrorists who have ravaged the country.
Okay, thank you. Anything to comment, Alexander, or you are satisfied?
Is Alexander from Russia?
No, no.
No. He's completely innocent.
Actually,
Yeah.
I don't think we have anyone from Russia present. Aklima, actually, she's still online. There was, there was a Russian girl. Okay, but maybe, yeah. Anyway, we move on, and then we have a question from Roma.
Could I just say one little thing, because it's also the format of what we are trying to do together here. Your first question had to do with education. You see, for me, education is not a matter of questions and answers. I would love to have somebody who were critical to what I said and who had some ideas about how to make the world a better place.
Definitely. But
I'm not an oracle yet.
Yeah. So maybe we go for these 2 questions that now already on the queue, and then we can change the direction of our discussion.
Sure, yeah, sure.
So Romas had a question.
I can speak now, yeah?
Yes.
We hope you can.
Yes. Jan, so I'm interested in this, how USA as an empire will collapse, and particularly in how would that look? You know, would it split? Would it become 50 states, or would it be like United Splitted States of America or something like that? Or is it maybe more? Because I'm thinking that if it will be, it will be mild, like sort of transition from. Should be easier than USA. I'm sorry. It should be easier in my mind than Soviet Union collapsed. Or like, what are your insights into this situation?
Well, that's an interesting question, why it would be more easy for the United States. The empire of the United States is much bigger, much stronger, and reaches into about, basically all countries in the world in different ways, militarily, civilianly, economically, technically. I think it's pretty complicated to see the dissolution of the empire. I want to emphasize, I'm talking about its empire. I'm not talking about the United States or the disunited states or whatever it will be after COVID, because I don't think we've seen the end of what COVID-19 will do to the United States in terms of leadership, in terms of conflicts between the local state leaders and Washington. And we haven't seen whether there will be at all elections, or Mr. Trump will try to cancel the elections and things like that. This kind of dissolution process that I foresee has also very much to do with the fact that it's a country with a hell of a lot of weapons among the citizens. I'm not quite sure how this will play out when you let people out in the streets again. And if you don't let people out in the streets again, I can tell you there will be violence. There's no way you can make people sit in New York in 40 degrees centigrade this summer and not leave their apartments. There will be riots, there will be terrible things happening. And what we have seen, if not people thought so before, we have seen that there is basically no leadership in the United States. The way Mr. Trump has made his press meetings, considering the corona, is bizarre. It's the closest I've seen in politics to what we call the theater of the absurd by UNESCO or Beckett. It's appalling to see. If you ask me economically, I don't know where it's going. If you take a place like the state of California, it's the 7th largest economy in the world. Some of them might actually be able to do well without being part of the United States. But I'm not predicting these things. I'm just speculating what could happen, in the aftermath of the corona. I also think that it will be difficult for the American leadership and the elites. I don't think it'll mean much difference to most citizens, you know, in the Midwest or something like that. But what it will mean to them to see that they are losing power. I mean, you can act like you're not losing power, but they are losing power, and the world is not obeying the United States anymore the way it did, you know, 20 years ago. Maybe some of the allies in Europe, but the rest of the world doesn't. Most of the people around the world are now either laughing or they are scared at the prospects. So what I see is that the empire will have to go, and it's not as sustainable for a number of reasons. And that will, and that's the good news, that will be a great boost for the republic. Because the moment you don't have to pay for all these wars, and you can take back your soldiers, you can close down your bases, you will have an enormous savings of money. You can also reduce Pentagon. And that money, that funding is desperately needed for rebuilding the infrastructure of the United States and having it participate in a different way in global interactions. So I would say it's better for the world not to have a US empire, and it's better for the US Republic not to have an empire. I see that as a benign future. What you and I and probably everybody else here can worry about is, will they be able to say goodbye to the empire and the global power role and integrate into other trends that are happening now, including the Belt and Road Initiative, without a war? That's what I don't know. I think I said in my lecture that it's interesting that, you know, there's nobody in the Western world who would have any of the qualities and visions of Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev. And of course, he is now not popular in the West, and he's not popular in the East. I simply don't care. He is one of the greatest statesmen, and he had the vision that when my empire is falling apart, I'm not going to have a war. I'm not going to show off. I'm not going to say the battle is over, the game is over, so now I blow up things. He was a very thoroughly decent man. And I would like to hope that there is some decency in the Western world also, but I'm not that optimistic. We might see a period of more warfare before it's over. God forbid.
So maybe a civil war.
Sorry?
Maybe a civil war could happen in the United States.
I have no idea. Could be. Could be.
It's very gloomy and dark, but I'm happy to hear that it will be better for us in a long way.
No, in the long way, of course. I mean, 20% of the US people are living under the minimum of existence, statistically defined, the poverty line, right? This year or next year, there will be no more poor people in China. And there were millions. Are you aware that China has uplifted? Statistics differ a little bit, but the World Bank figure is 400 to 500 million people out of poverty in 30 years. It has never been done before in human history. What has the United States done with its empire, with its ability to drag out resources, with its ability to dominate and control? It has not even created a good United States of America for its own people. Now, if that's democracy, I'm sorry, we need something else. So what I'm saying is, it would be much better for the American people, for everybody in the United States not to have an empire, because it's a huge economic burden and it makes America hated around the world. And I've never been anti-American in my life. And I'm not anti-American today. I'm anti-empire and I'm anti-militarism. Now, there's a hell of a difference about these things. I don't want things to go bad for the American people. When I say the empire must go, it's because I also think that that will be much better for the American people and for the world. You know, it's a great idea. Get rid of these fucking empires, because they destroy the world. And they destroy those who do it, you know. It corrupts people. You read your Gandhi and any psychologist, serious psychologists like Eric Fromm, whenever you use violence again and again and again against somebody else, you are ending up destroying yourself. Violence is, over time, always a boomerang.
Yeah.
When it becomes ingrained in your mode of operation every day to kill people, you are already, you know, losing something of the humanity you desperately need yourself to survive So yes, this killing machine, this empire, this control, this exceptionalism that the United States, parentheses, and Israel built on, that we are exceptional, we are over the rest, we are God's chosen people and things like that. Forget about all this. It doesn't fit the modern world. And you'll be a better place, and people around the world will love you again. I mean, I've grown up with the United States being a benevolent leader. I'm not saying benevolent in all respects, but definitely not where it is today. It was a much better leader before. Go back and listen to the speeches of John F. Kennedy. There's intellectualism, there's vision, there's...
Oh, we lost the sound. Can you hear now? Because we can't.
Jan, we cannot hear you.
Okay.
Like it's very silent. We can't.
Things got very silent. Yes.
Now it's good. It was a glitch, I
Even
guess.
I got silent.
Yes.
Yes. We have the next question from Holm.
Maybe you could speak up, because really I have difficulty in hearing you now.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can see your mouth moving, so I can try to read what you say.
Yeah.
And now we tried to.
Can you hear us?
I don't know, something probably changed at your place. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay.
So they can't hear.
Well, if you speak up, let me have the next question, whoever it is, or view or comment or critique or suggestion.
Okay, the next question comes from Holm.
We cannot hear him, no.
Holm, we cannot hear you. If you could go, if you're on your computer, you can go to the bottom left and make sure your right microphone is selected. Sometimes helps also take out the headphones.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Yeah, first I want to say thank you for interesting talks. It's very good to hear.
Can you speak up a little bit, because otherwise I cannot hear what you said apart from thank you.
All right. Yeah, I'm speaking all the way from Mozambique, so it's I will speak up. My question is, what do you think are the three most important universal priorities for all the people who want to or already are fighting for a peaceful and fair people-powered planet?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very, very difficult to hear, but I heard you say something like, what do I think the priorities are for those who are working for a more peaceful world? Is that basically what you said?
Yes, correct. Yes, correct.
Okay. Well, I am a staunch believer in constructive thoughts and thinking and, if you will, utopias. I think it's the main, or should be, I'm not telling what people should do, don't get me wrong, but what I think should be the priority is to think about alternative defense and security in such a way that we get rid of the arms race and we get rid of warfare, instead of criticizing one war after the other or one new weapon system after the other. Because when you criticize this, this year you criticize F-35, next year you criticize F-36, next year there's a new one called F-37, you see what I mean? It's the same critique you do, you're kept employed by doing these things. Whereas you should get to the root of why does these things come up? Why do we have warfare? And again, here you have to read a little bit of books. And then say, hey, if we don't have it, what would we have instead? if we who work for peace had all the powers in the world, if we were like God and could just make 3 decisions, what would we make for decisions to make the world a more peaceful place? And that is to think about conflict resolution, non-violence. It is to think about a reformed economic system for many countries. And it is to think about all the things that I tried to say very quickly, but you can read more on the transnational.live about it because there's a series growing now. How do we create human security? Human security is immensely important because Corona is so important because it has told us, documented for everyone to see that there is no security for human beings. There's only security for some territories and some governments and what I call the military, industrial, media, academic complex. There should be a revolution against that thinking and say the main thing we must secure when we say the word security is human beings, their welfare and their needs. And then we build it up from there and we end with the humanity security. The idea of a militarized or national security policy building predominantly on arms is a philosophy that has no future. And that's what we have seen now. No country had enough stored to secure the people when the pandemic hit. And that should be something we really think about. What did they spend taxpayers' money on? They spent it on weaponry that has created a new Cold War, lots of wars in the Middle East and elsewhere, huge incomes for a few industries which are destructive to the rest of the civilian economy. And they're now losing it too. The most strongly militarized country in human history, namely the United States, is now going down in spite of all these investments. I would say because of all these investments, but people would say in spite of all these investments in the military. So let's use constructively the corona, COVID-19, because it's a much better wake-up call than a nuclear war would have been.
Yeah.
And God forbid, I hope we'll never have a wake-up call like that. But COVID is so serious from that point of view. I'm not saying it's killed that many people compared with other diseases, this is another discussion. But it should make everybody wake up to see that what they have paid as taxpayers for national security has simply been a fraud. There was no security for our neighbors, for the people working at hospitals. There were no masks, there were no thermometers, there was nothing of what was needed to keep people secure when that happened. Because threats are constructed to fit the military we have, not the real challenges that the world has in front of it. So what I'm saying is, a peace movement should use the corona thing to demand a new thinking about what security is, and that's conflict resolution. If you want to have military, it's defensive military that can only be used on your own country, your own region or whatever, not be threatening somebody 5,000 kilometers away. It's no bases abroad and all that. And it is non-violent, it's economic security, it's ecological security, and it is health security. That is security politics. That would, I would say I'm a little tired of everybody saying that the climate change problem is the most important problem in the world. It is hugely important, don't get me wrong. But it's not that much more important than getting rid of militarism and militarized security and warfare. It's not that much more. If it is, I would say walk on 2 legs and look finally at the interactions between the militarization and warfare on the one hand and the environment on the other hand. You'll find out that the military is probably the single largest destroyer of the environment and contributor to climate change. For its resources it uses, for the environment it destroys when you have warfare, for the culture it destroys, that's also part of our environment, the UNESCO cities, Aleppo, etc. And because it's not even able to secure human beings who fall ill from things like COVID. This must go. There's no way we can survive this, and that's why I said there can be no going back to something normal before the COVID. It's over. And that's why I said, you know, the militaries can, we must help them, teach them to how to peace off and not destroy the rest of society. It's a tiny elite in the world who do these things.
It is.
Yes.
I agree. Yeah. Thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good question also. Hey, I had only good questions. That's incredible.
We do have some more, but we are just arriving to the end of this session. But I think we have more time for 3 questions.
Yes.
Or some comments.
I still have problems in hearing you for some reason, so
Yeah, that was.
shout at me.
Don't even say that. Yes. We have a question from Catherine. Catherine, if you would like to make one question of the 3.
Catherine, you were
I am muted.
You are
Yes.
unmuted. You can speak.
Catherine, we should be able to hear you.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. First, thanks for all the explanations and the variety of information from many situations in the whole world. I had a question about Latin America, but you already answered before. Then there is something, because I work a lot with Asia and China, and I would like, as you mentioned, that China could be one of the next empires of the world. And how long do you, because it's obviously, I think that many people know that products that come from Asia and from China, sometimes it's not very well seen by the other cultures. They think that it has no quality or anything. And we know that this is not the truth, because they have a very advanced technology, studies, and everything. So how long do you think that people will be more open to understand the powerful of this region? And of course, just adding that it was not mentioned, of all this military situation and the countries, and who is preventing a war with the other countries and everything, the position about the South Korea and North Korea in all this environment of the military and this stuff.
Okay, I must say that I think I missed probably 40% of your question. It was about how long time do I think people will, did you say ignore or not accept or understand the Chinese role?
Okay, no, the thing is,
well, you know, I think as time is passing now, you find out that there is more and more people, intellectuals, business people, not the least, and younger people who are finding out that Asia is interesting and something interesting is going on.
Yes.
Whereas if you go to the sectors of, let's say, security research, military research, American think tanks, American and Western politicians, including the Danish government, etc., they don't have a clue that there's a world outside the European Union. They'll be the last to find out. I mean, let me give you an example. The Danish Prime Minister gives a press conference a few days after America has liquidated General Soleimani in Iran. And she opens up the press conference by saying that she condemns the attack that Iran then did on 2 bases, US bases in Iraq. And then the journalist asked her, well, you're condemning the response, but how do you view the fact that America killed a top leader in Iran? And she says, and I quote her directly, "I have no need for commenting on American activities." You know, that's a person who has not understood that there is a bigger world outside the US sphere. And there will be a huge wake-up moment for countries that are not now trying to walk on two legs. I've written a couple of articles here and there also in Danish, where I argue for the fact, let's keep friendly with America and NATO countries and the EU and all that, but let's over time begin to move and be open for new relations. Walk on two legs, a Western leg and an Eastern leg. Be curious about what happens, intensify your diplomatic work, take part in small or bigger ways in the Belt and Road Initiative, get the benefits, make new friends, etc. And it's deaf ears. If you take the country like Denmark, Sweden, and I guess to a certain extent Norway, which I know less, these countries do not listen to anything that does not come out of Washington. It's his master's voice, you know. That's what we listen to. And those countries will be way behind in the future.
And what he said.
If you walk on two or three legs, you will be part of the interesting new world. If you don't, and if you have no views about what happens in the United States because you have decided that you cannot speak freely and criticize the United States even as a friend of it and then a helper of it, which Denmark has been now for 20 years, participating in warfare everywhere. You know, if you are so submissive, you have not understood what is going on in the world. Or you are a very bad diplomat who is not, I'm still speaking about the Prime Minister of Denmark, you're a very bad diplomat if you cannot express a concern about such a violation of international law. If we cannot call a spade anymore, even in diplomatic terms, but we're totally submissive, then I would say a country like Denmark is in the same position today as Eastern Germany was vis-a-vis Moscow. And we know where that ended rather soon.
Yes.
So I think parts of the West will wake up, particularly business people will, and I think we should be friends with a lot of business, civilian business. Because they are often seeing, you know, where things are happening.
Mm-hmm. We really need to move on, but unless you can have like a closure.
Can I just...
Can you shout at me, please? Because otherwise I cannot move anywhere.
We're just saying that we're running out of time. And we're just letting to know, Karin, that there is Katrin, sorry, I'm sorry. It's yeah. I just misspelled it. But if
we're running out of time, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yes. And then we have a last question that we will pick up. We had to choose, and we choose Karin. And then after that, we will proceed with some discussions rather than, yeah.
Is it me? It's Karin Utas Karlsson. Is it me? It's mute now, so I think I can speak.
Yes.
Yeah, fine. Yes, I see that there is an increasing cooperation between the peace movement, the climate change movement, and welfare movement, especially among the young people. And also lately I've heard quite a bit is happening in Europe, European countries, across countries. And you haven't mentioned anything about this hope we have about cooperation to raise the awareness of ordinary people, including diplomats and politicians and everybody. So can you say something about this cooperation between peace, welfare movements, climate change movement, and youth, and the older?
Is the second movement you mentioned, do you say welfare?
Well,
what
yes.
Did you, I didn't hear the word.
Well, welfare. That's right.
So the peace movement, the welfare movement, and the
climate.
Be open to the change. Well, there's all kinds of ways you can cooperate between these movements. Welfare is a global need. I don't know a society that does not want a welfare in the sense of basic needs satisfied for its people.
No.
And, you know, you cannot work for peace today if you do not work with a better relationship between the West and China. And if you don't go to China, and if you don't listen to what China and India, I'm saying China all the time, but Asia as such, is saying, if you don't travel there and link up with peace movement or like-minded movements in this part of the world also. I mean, if you sit in Denmark and you just do work against Danish F-35 to be acquired, I don't think you'll get very far. If you want to be part of a world movement, you have to work and coordinate. And that's why modern technology is such a beautiful thing. There's no reason to have national movements anymore. We can have regional movements, we can have global movements. And they can be coordinated on Zoom. I mean, if we can hear each other.
That's true, definitely. Yeah. It works at least.
I'm sorry if this was not a good answer, but I really am not sure what you were aiming at because I can't hear you.
Okay, I say that people work together in the movements, and I see it as a good sign.
Of course.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
But mind you, I've been saying again and again, don't spend all your energy on being critical. Spend your energy on being constructive. Produce 5 good ideas after each meeting about what should be done. Because I can tell you one thing from more than 40 years of experience. Nobody in politics listens to you when you criticize what they do. They criticize each other, they're criticized by the media. Criticism is a negative world that is politics. But if you come up with ideas which are much better, then you're considered dangerous, and then you begin to gather people who follow you outside politics, outside formal politics. It's when you say, hey, why don't we do this instead of keeping on doing that? You will then find out that in a very short time, and reading a little and having good study circles and educating yourself about these issues, you will know much more and have much better idea than the average politicians in democracies. You know, it's very easy to beat politicians today because they don't know that much. They are politicians for a very short time, and they don't join politics in order to change the world. They don't, many of them are joining it as a career. And then they go over to companies or the military afterwards or whatever it is. So the slogan that I did not use in this lecture, but which I had actually jotted down towards the end, was one that I always use, namely one by George Bernard Shaw. And it goes like this. Most people look at the world as it is and ask why. Why do we have all these problems? Why do we have all this suffering? Why do we have all these wars? What we should do instead is to look at the world as it could be and ask why not, or how to get there. I've changed these words a little bit, but that is the whole thing. Working for peace is about having better ideas about the future. It's not about criticizing what there is. Gandhi never criticized only without having his constructive program. Don't move out of the house where the water runs in through the roof. Don't leave that house before you have built the new one to move over to. That's what the task of a peace movement is, to be positive, constructive, and have better ideas and strategies, together with welfare movements, the Chinese movement. The Chinese are winning because they have a vision. They think in 40, 50 years ahead. And as I said in the lecture, if you ask an average politician in the West today, even many intellectuals, you'll get nothing interesting if you ask, what do you think your society or the world should look like in 40 years from now? Criticism is important, but if you want to change the world, constructivism is much more important.
Yes. So for now, it's that's it with the questions. I mean, it doesn't mean that we don't have any more, but I think we have to a little bit stop right now with the questions. And we have asked a few people to share their, to comment and to share their experience of today. And then that's what we will start now. So now we give a word to Maxime.
Were you saying anything to me? No. Okay.
Not this time.
Not this time.
Maxime, are you with us?
Sorry, was that to me also?
No, we're talking to Max.
Okay.
But apparently, yeah. Then maybe, yeah. Maybe then Beatrice?
Okay, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I was asked to, I don't know, do a little conclusion comment. There were so many good things and good thoughts that came up today. So I'm a little bit like full of ideas going around in my head, but I will try to find one that maybe, I don't know, can be a good conclusion, at least for my day with you. So for me, I think the highlight of today was that I could find proper examples and facts and realities that prove my positivity, I'd say. So seeing that actually people with much more education and much more deeper knowledge than the one that I have are still positive on future and on this reality really inspires me. And as I think I was sharing this with the first group, with the first discussion group, I was saying how important it is also to start from your personal, on a personal level. So you can really do step by step little things and change the reality. Of course, then it's really important to, I think, also try to gather people and to cooperate with many more people. But starting also on a personal level, so for example, speaking and talking with people in a non-violent way, in a gender equal way, or whatever makes the world more peaceful and your little reality more peaceful can be, I think, a good first step. So yeah, thank you to all the people I've talked with, and especially to Jan for today. It was really, really good and inspiring.
Thank you, Beatrice.
The next person that we have, it's Mr. Daxius.
Or Sally Duckers.
We've been muted.
Oh, that's okay.
Hi, yeah, we're speaking in from Wales. It's been an amazing day. The morning session, the lectures.
I can't hear you. You'll have to speak up.
Okay, I'm speaking from Wales, on a hilltop in Wales. We're a long way from you guys. It's been brilliant. I've loved it. I think a positive action that you could do, Jan, is to give us all a reading list, because you talk read, and I agree with that. You know, kind of for our children, my daughter's over in DNS, I want her to read, and for all her colleagues to read, and to know more. I think the only thing I think's been missing from today, perhaps, is the conversation about the giant corporations and their relationships with China. So I know Google has got a difficult relationship with China, and it'll be interesting to see, because also maybe the future of warfare will be cyber warfare. So I think it's been amazing today. I've learned so much, and I'm going to read so much more. I'm going to take from the day a hunger to know more. I think, Jan, you're incredible, your wisdom. I haven't seen the world. So the world that you talk about, I can't go to China. I can't go to all these places, but hopefully through this portal, I can learn more. Thank you all for sharing today. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much. The big corporations is a problem, but basically it depends on what they produce and how they do it.
Mm.
Thank you very much.
For some things, you need big companies. You cannot do it with a family company.
Yes. Yes, and the next person, we have Gert.
I hear no question. Is that because there is no question?
Well, probably they left for a moment. And then if somebody has a comment or a feedback, could just raise the hand and then we will let that person speak. Mustafa would like to comment. Can we? Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna try to scream so you can hear me, Mr. Jan. I just wanted to say one of the most eye-opening things about today was you talking about construction rather than criticism. I think that's a thing that a lot of people forget to do, even in their own lives, not only about war and politicians. However, I truly hope the future of the Middle East is not as dark as you see it to be.
It's not going to what? Say that again?
I hope the future of the Middle East will not be as dark as you think.
Well, so do I.
Personally,
you didn't ask me what I hoped for. You asked me what I thought.
Absolutely. However, there is one thing that a lot of people who don't speak the language miss because of the language. The Middle East is on a amazing cultural and educational rise. I mean, you can see it on the internet. The articles have shifted. The thought process has shifted. The need for violence has been reduced. And actually, I see a great hope in that, and I see like a big silver lining when it comes to that.
Great.
Other than that, I just want to thank you very much.
Thank you. Work for it.
Yes, thank you very much for that comment. And I see that there was Janina who would like to comment something.
So thank you very much. Well, thank you for putting up this conference on Zoom, so even me from Far East Japan could take part in it. It was very interesting to hear all kind of opinions. It would be also very good to hear about like post-corona future world, what's like trends, what's coming next, because at the moment, the way I see it, the future looks like in Japan, it will change fundamentally from how things are done, how days being structured, how the school is structured, more online alternatives, everything. There was even released like 5-year vision, like how it will look like 2025, like more international relationships, more integration. Because Japan was like stagnating, was stuck for decades, like being reserved, like keeping for themselves, like maintaining the integrity, like preserving the prosperity and the cultural values and everything, and the rest, like a little bit peak of everything. Well, that's what it is. So, but anyway, thank you so much for making this conference possible online, and greetings to all.
But we cannot thank Zoom for not making the microphones operating, but okay. You did a great job technically. I'm sure this is not easy to do. Thank you so much from me too. Can I just say one? I don't know whether we're going to round off, but you know, I'm not paid for sitting here any longer, so.
Yeah, and that's why we are trying to.
Jokes aside, I just want to say 2 things. I would really like that this is not a kind of one-timer, but that this meeting leads to us being in contact in the future, you using the materials we produce at TFF, etc. And we can link up with each other at social media, or that you will subscribe to the mails we send out, etc. Because that we are here for you. I mean, that's what we have built is for people like you. And that's essential. The other thing is, if you'll permit me, we have been struggling all our lives with funding, and have decided in spite of that, that two things apply. We take no money from corporations, we take no money from governments, and none of us are paid for what we have done now since 1985. So if you think things like this is important, you do two things for us. One is you speak well about what you have seen, and you refer other people to go to, you know, transnational.live. And you may also, I know most of you are probably not very wealthy. I don't see Bill Gates among your faces, I can see. So, but I just thought that you might also go to transnational.live/donate and just decide to give $5 every month or something like that. We would appreciate that very much, because that keeps us going to say what we say. And we are the last bastion in terms of free research and free speech, even in the peace research community, because the other peace research institutes are very much dependent on state funding, such as CIPRI, such as PRIO in Oslo, etc. They all get huge money from Western governments. We don't get any money because we want to be able to decide our own policies and not adapt what we say in public to something we know will be conducive to getting our grants next year and things like that. We've stopped that long ago. So people financing is what we believe in. People financing for free research and free public education. If you find that important, we appreciate even the smallest sum, like a cup of coffee now and then. Thank you.
Yes, and you actually said our words, because we also shared the links. Everything, all the links that you mentioned right now, it's in the chat, and we really invite people to donate and read on transnationals.live and sign up for newsletter, because that's also quite a piece of read every month, or more often. So we encourage everyone who participated, and believe me, Jan, we learned from transnationals in our college. That became a piece of a good source for our articles and discussions and debates we're having here in DNS.
And I can see that many people in the chat are being very inspired and have been very inspired. So thank you very much, Jan, for your time and to deliver so good information. And thank you also to all of you that could participate in this main conference. I would like also to say, not to finish, because also we have an optional program after this session, that for the ones who would like to participate, we will have next week DNS online courses, which are free for everyone, which they will be in the Facebook page of DNS posted. Topics included Palestine issue, neocolonialism, and so on. So you are very welcome also to join them in info.dns, but also in the Facebook page.
Yes, and then another option is to finalize this day with a cultural and artful expression. So closer to the evening, 19:30, so 7:30, we will have cultural performances. Some artists are signed up, and I think it will be a great evening and closure for this day, because as also Jan, you said, the future is full of art and creativity. So an invitation for you to join, to not just leave this room right now, but also to join the performance. And then we will mention some of the artists. Could you hear us well, or is just Jan? Do you have difficulties to hear us?
It's not easy to hear you, but I get some of what you're saying. You're talking about art and culture at the moment, right?
Yes, okay. So there will be Demian and Matteo. It's a former DNS student they will have a song performance about war, peace, pollution, sustainable life, and refugees. So there will be a complex song, I guess it sounds. Then we will have Siso from Syria. It's a friend of DNS College, and he will perform the rap song created by him. We also, as well, will have Irina, who will from Russia, and she will share a poem and perform. Then we will have yes, you can pronounce
Salahaddin
Roberto Redavid. He's composer, pianist, and researcher from Italy. So we will have performance from him too. We will have Mehdi. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he's a Moroccan musician who will perform some music that he created for us.
And as well, Paolo Rossetti, community music leader and performer from Italy. So as you can hear, there will be a full evening of great expressions and different ways to conclude on topics we just talked about. And overall, I would like to thank everyone for participation. The chat is now just like going with the thanks, and people are leaving. But those who are staying, I still will try to express my gratitude for this day. It was a pleasure to have you, Jan, and you set the tone for the day with the presentations and all, and inspired really many discussions. And I agree with you saying that it shouldn't stop here, and that's actually the point. I think, and main conclusion that it's not anymore about talking. It's really about getting on board all the input that we received today from each other, learning from each other, and creating, brainstorming some ideas and implementing these things live and around us, probably locally for the beginning, and then let's see, or it becomes a global movement. And this Justice Conference is famous by that actually during these conferences people really connect, get inspired, and I would imagine that online one will not be an exception. Even though we didn't meet live, we appreciate that everyone could take part in all over the world. Thank you, Zoom, for this possibility, and thank you actually also this crisis for this opportunity to actually connect us around the globe, because as I was saying in the beginning, not everyone would be able to come to Denmark to visit our conference. From all this crowd who was able to join, and from Mozambique, and from Japan, and even Colombian representatives, and so on. So I think, thank you for this day. We're very happy to meet the ones who will continue with us in this optional group discussion about what's next. We are also opening the panel at 5 o'clock. Am I right? Yes, at 5 o'clock there is an open panel back here, and we will have a discussion of what's next. What is it that what is it that was not discussed, not expressed? We will try to have a discussion back at Zoom. Yes, and otherwise, those who join, we will see you later, and those who don't, we say big thank you, send a lot of hugs, and stay tuned together with DNS on our presentations, and together with Transnationals .live. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Virtual hug. Thank you.
Yes. Kisses. Yes. See you at 5.